Okay, hello and welcome back to the Do the Work podcast. I am here today back on Zoom. Not done a Zoom for a very long time, back in COVID times, if we're allowed to say that word. Got a guest with us today, so I've got Jules, or I suppose Sunday name Juliet O'Sullivan, but we'll call you Jules today, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Amazing. So thanks for joining us. We're going to be having a chat today around nutrition, but quite specifically around the sort of the GLP-1 drugs. So people know them more so as sort of Ozempic and Manjaro. I've got at least one client at the minute who's on Manjaro. I know you've had some experiences as well. So we were just hoping to have a little bit of an open discussion on the good uses of them and then things to be aware of, and then maybe where they might cause and create some problems as well. We were just saying before we went live that this thing is here to stay. And so people, both coaches and generally the general population probably need to have a better understanding over what it is, what it does, and when possibly it might be useful for them. But before we do that, Jules, if you could just give us a little bit of a background introduction into yourself, what you do, all of that stuff.
Okay, hi. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm just known as Jules. I have a company called Life and Fork, and it's worn many hats. So I originally I qualified and quite quickly randomly ended up in the film industry. So worked on like blockbuster movies, getting men who were in average shape into really good shape for whatever role it was. And then off the side of that, created a meal prep company because a lot of these actors didn't really want to know what they needed to do. They just needed the food putting in front of them. So I went into that and became kind of a glorified dinner lady because all I did was cook in my kitchen by myself and then courier it down to London. And I was traveling to London a lot, three kids up here. It all got a bit much. So naturally veered back to working as an online coach and attracted my own tribe. So I generally work with perimenopausal, middle-aged women with quite busy lifestyles. That's my niche now, really, with a bit of a side serving of performance nutrition. So I work at the local football academy as their consultant nutritionist. So I work quite a lot with kids and kind of relationship with food, their behavior around food. I'm very passionate about that, especially in something like football where they can be, they're getting measured and weighed a lot and told quite old-fashioned advice. So I'm very passionate about getting young kids to understand the importance of food enjoyment and, not eating to gauge up against how much exercise they're doing. So that kind of stems from me seeing so many women messed up in the what is about it, makes me really passionate about making sure that we give them the gift of a good relationship with food as children so that we don't in 30 years time hopefully have this problem still going. So that's where I'm at now, but generally it's working with middle-aged women, often with kids that work full time, and mental bandwidth is absolutely maxed out. So their perception of themselves is that they're lazy and useless and unmotivated, when the reality is they don't physically have the mental capacity to be taking on weight loss right now. So I look at ways to try and open up that mental bandwidth to allow them to start thinking about how they're going to lose weight effectively.
Understood. And it's to sort of land the point, it's purely nutrition with regards to the clients that you work with. So it's nutrition coaching, isn't
That's
it?
right. Yeah. I'm in no way a PT. Again, massively encourage movement and particular strength training because of the age of the women. Strength training is never more important than for a woman who is losing every ounce of estrogen. So big promoter of it, but not qualified to do, program anything for them. So I work literally just with the nutrition side of things.
Okay. So I suppose the glamour of movies and stuff like that, you'd probably think that most people sort of dream to do that, and then you sort of come back into working with sort of Gen Pop people into the real world, so to speak,
Yeah,
dealing with real people problems.
absolutely. And you know what? It does sound glamorous, and it was, literally getting flown out all over the place. Like I think the record was about 9 hours in Marrakesh just to see someone fly home, and it sounds glamorous. And parts of it are, it's ace, you get to go on set, you get to see, I'm literally on set watching things being filmed. But the reality is, with 3 kids, and at the time I was a single mum, it was so much travel for, you know, there was no reward in it, in that these men were getting paid what, 8 million quid to lose weight. They're going to do what they're told. They're going to lose weight. You're a cog in a massive machine. No one's particularly grateful for you, and I just wasn't getting any satisfaction or, enjoyment from it, or self-worth from it. Whereas come back to working with women, who've struggled for 30 years with weight loss or food noise, and I get these messages saying like, I cannot believe I've just, I've had mini eggs in the cupboard for a week and I've not looked at them. I can't tell you how freeing this feels. I can't tell you how grateful I am. That's why I do this. And ultimately, I get a million times more enjoyment, from working with these women than I do from getting to say that I sat on the set of some massive film and see 10 minutes of it being filmed. It's not worth it.
You've had the experience and then you've come back to real life. So no, that's it's good. And you get a lot out of helping the average person, and that's why in a PT world, PTs that sort of stand the test of time is the ones that just genuinely want to help people, and hopefully that's where we are now and sort of continue to do so. But without sort of segueing too much, let's dive into, I suppose, the topic that we're here for. So GLP-1 drugs it feels like they've come out of nowhere, but they haven't. They've always been there to
Yeah,
treat
yeah.
diabetics and things like that. And ultimately, the role that they do is that they essentially get the body to produce more insulin, and also it reduces appetite, which results in essentially us not eating as much if we're on that drug, which is going to result in weight loss. And we know that that's because it essentially puts us in a calorie deficit because we don't want to eat as much as what we used to do. And now that's the experience that I'm having with the client that I have that's currently on the drug, if you will, being prescribed the drug. He just isn't having the cravings to snack and things like that. But with it comes some issues and some problems, and one of those is that he feels a little bit like he's losing some muscle along the way. He probably can't get as much as a pump as what he used to, so sometimes there might be a little bit of a conflict. Is he losing muscle mass? Can he just not get a pump because he's a little bit depleted?
Yeah.
But he is losing weight, and before then he wasn't losing weight, and so for him it probably is quite a good fit, which lends me over to the question to you, Jules. And what have you seen in terms of maybe this being either prescribed or, let's say, not prescribed but being used in an incorrect manner? Like, are there occasions where this isn't a useful drug for people?
Yeah, I think certainly. What's interesting is that, like you, I've got quite a few clients on it now, um, with all very different A, expectations of it, and B, outcomes. And then kind of stepping out of my professional head, I've got people socially, like friends locally, so all my clients that are on it, let me think, I've got only one of them's actually diabetic. The others are overweight with considerable weight to lose, and have gone on it. One is GP led, and one, it's not like, but you can get it, for example, through like Superdrug, or there's other companies where you have like a coach alongside it and things like that. And then I have a pool of friends that get it from, I don't even know where. It's definitely, off. I think it's prescribed from a nurse, but it's what you out of a salon or something like
Yeah, or
that.
like a beauty salon or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
There's like a black market of it. And what I tend to see, like one person gets it for everyone and then kind of just tells everyone else how to administer it and when to increase the doses and stuff, which absolutely petrifies me. However, as by personality, I'm quite open-minded. I will sit and hear someone out before I jump down the throat with it. So, but my issue is a lot of them are in already lean bodies. They've maybe put a few pounds on from menopause, and they're using it to just control those last few pounds that are hard to get on and off. Now, in this scenario, I'm looking at this, very few of them strength train at all. And I've heard claims of, oh, it's amazing. All I eat is like a bag of crisps, and all I ate today was a bag of crisps and an apple. So the nutritionist in me is going, you are middle-aged, you are, estrogen levels are dropping at a fast rate of knots. And the impact that that is having is your bone density is not staying put unless you remind it to do so. Your muscle mass is not staying put unless you remind it to do so. And an overall caloric deficit is creating, there's so much starts to happen in a body that's undernourished, even more so in one that's not resistance training or doing any exercise. So whilst right now it's keeping those couple of pounds off, in 20 years' time, I always describe it as that's going to look like the granny in something about Mary, very kind of frail, really lean, no muscle mass. And I think the problem is that we all look at ourselves at our age now, and women don't project 20, 30 years later and look at, the woman who hasn't got any muscle mass or bone density left, can't get themselves out the sofa, can't get themselves onto the toilet, never mind off it, can't get themselves up and down the stairs, can break something just by banging it hard enough against something, and they're not looking at any of that or considering, they're just considering the now and looking good for the age now. And what's so ironic is all these women that are doing it for vanity are doing everything they can to not age, but actually they're aging their bodies so fast, while they're right now striving to look younger, they're going to look so much older in 20 years' time. So that's my issue with that side of it. But then conversely, I have my clients who are overweight and have a huge, I think one of my clients is a GP and has gone on it and was very opposed to going on it for months because there are side effects, and these are really, in a lot of cases overplayed on social media, let's say. But she decided that the side effects of being overweight and having, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, increased risk of diabetes, all those things, the side effects of being overweight were just as risky as the side effects of taking, Manjaro, Ozempic, or whatever, whichever one she's been administered. And I thought that was a really good, interesting outlook. And actually, as we look more and more at the side effects, there aren't any, unless you are predisposed with, a liver or kidney condition that it exacerbates. There aren't any we're not seeing any harrowing side effects yet that make it a really high risk drug to take. And I think, again, there's the point that, if a drug's going to be effective, it's probably going to have side effects. If it doesn't have any side effects, the chances are that drug's not really going to be that effective at doing anything. So people that have a bias towards hating these drugs and think that they're cheating and that they're for people that are lazy and everything, will jump onto all the side effects and say how dangerous they are. And certainly, you see a lot of people on podcasts, the same types that are going into supermarkets and telling you not to eat seed oils, that these drugs, have got all these side
I think I
effects.
might know who you're talking about.
They might, all these side effects could be massively detrimental when actually, when you look at the evidence, then they're not any worse than loads of the other drugs that we take chronically, like statins and all the rest. There's not really a lot in it. So it's kind of becoming a weaker and weaker argument as time goes by.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I don't really know where to start.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad, isn't there? One of the things that stood out to me towards the beginning of what you were saying there is the importance as women get older to strength train. So to go back towards the top there, from the PT standpoint, in terms of strength training, if you just want to retain or maintain muscle mass and bone density from, the same way in which you did in your 20s when you're in your 50s and 60s, you're looking at doing 3 times the frequency as to what you did before. And what we tend to find is that people go on to do less exercise than what they did before, which causes the problems like you talked about of getting out of a chair and being able to do simple basic things, getting down to pick the grandkids up and what have you, and just generally not needing help and support of family members to do basic life day-to-day things, if you will. So I think we carry a responsibility to make sure that we do that. And unfortunately, as a woman, it's accelerated a little bit faster by the estrogen dropping and all the things that come with the menopause and stuff. Now, the bit that this segues into with the drug is that if you're already not doing those things and then you take this drug, the likelihood of you reducing at a quicker rate is going to be higher. When you're trying to lose weight, the most important thing that you do, of course, is to lose weight, but really it's to lose body fat and maintain as much muscle mass as possible.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if you're taking something that essentially drops your appetite down and you're only eating, like you said before, the apple and the bag of crisps, and you're sort of shouting about that, you think that's amazing because the scales are coming down. The scales are coming down, but you're going to be losing a chunk of muscle mass as well, which is really critical stuff to hold on to, especially when you're in a stage of life where it's very, very difficult to, never mind build it, to maintain it.
Yeah.
So I think more needs to be done around the education of it for people to understand generally that strength training is really important, but that it's important alongside these drugs. And I think it's important to point out that no matter how old you are, it's important that you look into what you are eating whilst you're on the drug and not just that you're eating loads less, and you're looking into the quality of it. And I'm sure we'll touch on that, but also the importance of both strength training and protein intake alongside that.
Absolutely.
Um, and I'm far from like a real sort of study guru, but from what I've seen, the difference is night and day between sort of long-term fat loss and satisfaction from people that have lost weight while strength training and managing protein intake and quality of nutrition compared to people that just take the drug. Like, what experience have you seen of that, or what are you aware of around the differences of, what
Yeah.
people do?
Okay, so literally singing from exactly the same sheet as you. The amount, and you're absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think if people were more, or women were more educated, we say to them, strength train, eat protein. If they, like I'm like it, if someone hasn't explained the science and the mechanism, there's no buy-in for me to do it. There's no motivation to do that thing. So I think educating women that, if the side effect of losing estrogen is that muscle is very metabolically expensive. It costs, it's hard work for the body to keep it. So it'll absolutely get rid of it if at every opportunity it can. And the only way to counteract that, as you alluded to, is to go into the gym and remind that muscle that it's there, frequently. So every other day, ideally, slightly more. So I think educating women around the importance of that, I think educating them, even things down to like, why would going to the gym increase bone density? Like that's a good question. Like, quite a lot of clients ask me. And it's a really good point. Like when you think about why does squatting, why does that make your bones any stronger? So just, simple snippets of information like the fact that your muscles are attached to the end of your bones. And every time you contract that muscle, it tugs on the bone. And when we tug on a bone, the bone starts to get pulled apart, and that triggers a response to the bone to go, right, we need to start rebuilding this because it's getting tugged apart. And that's how bone density is maintained or increased. So for a woman who's not doing any strength training, there's, or not doing the other way to increase bone density is to bash your bones against something. So that's why, as you will, I'm sure, agree, plyometrics, things like that for middle-aged women, we don't tend to do it. We don't tend to jump on and off things anymore. It feels quite alien to do, but that's the whole point. The day you jump off a box for the last time is the last time that you'll ever be able to do that if you don't do it for another 20 years. If we continue to bash bones, like we did as kids, that bone density remains. So I think, but women aren't challenged with this. They're not taught this. They don't understand that is, we're just told strength train because it keeps muscle and keeps bone density. But I do think there's a massive lack of education on and around that, which plays into when women are going on Ozempic and just having these massive depletes in appetite. It's such a relief for them because inevitably, if they're overweight, they've had this food noise their entire life. So, we know that obesity is it's a dysregulation of appetite. So I get quite defensive for people with obesity because everyone's kind of that old, oh, they need to like just move more and eat less mentality shows the complete ignorance of the fact that I always use the example that when we, someone in a lean body goes out and gets drunk and is hungover and kind of laughs about the fact that they can't stop eating on the day after, or today I've eaten 2 McDonald's and all the rest of it, and it's kind of worn as a bit of a badge of honor. What they're not understanding is that people with obesity, that's how they feel every day. They never eat and feel satiated. It's that constant, what can I eat next? What can I eat? What can I eat next? So for women that kind of, see this deplete in appetite, that have had this food noise for years and years and years, it's such a euphoric feeling for them to not be eating a lot and to be losing all this weight. And what I see in some women is that motivation to go to the gym drops even more. And actually, I see that in the leaner body people that go on Ozempic. So maybe before they discovered Ozempic, they were regularly strength training to try and keep the weight off. Whether that be right or wrong is another conversation to be had. But what I'm starting to see is that people that go on Ozempic that are using it to get like an Ibiza body for the summer, or to get those few pounds that menopause has brought on, it's stopping them doing the health-seeking behaviors they used to do that was actually improving the health. So because they're losing weight on Ozempic, they're now not bothering to go to the gym because they're like, well, there's no drive to go now because I've got the weight off. So that's kind of the ugly side, another, ugly side effect I see of people in smaller bodies using Ozempic. Then conversely, when I have clients who do have a lot of weight to lose, I can give you an example of one this week. She messaged and it was euphoria. She's only been on it a week or so. And for the first, she was shutting cupboards and not giving it another thought, and has never had that food freedom, has never been able to think like that. And then in the next sentence has gone to the gym that day and left a voice note saying, I've just squatted with a barbell for the first time in my entire life. And she won't have linked the dots, and I haven't linked them for her. But when people are in larger bodies and struggle to lose weight, they don't feel that they belong in a gym. They don't feel that they're confident enough to walk in there, and they feel that they're going to get judged for it. The minute these people start to not be in this headspace where they're thinking about food all the time, and they're starting to see the weight come down on the scales, they start to feel like normal people. And this was her exact word. She said, I actually feel like a normal person. And when someone feels like a normal person, they then don't exclude themselves from other things in life where they don't think they belong. So although they probably don't see it in themselves, I see it so commonly. As these people start to lose weight, they then have the balls to walk into a gym and maybe go and try squatting with a barbell, not standing in the corner with dumbbells doing, squatting half the weight because they don't want to draw attention to themselves in a squat rack. Or so it has these massive psychological not implications, like advantages, whereby because they are now losing the weight and starting to feel like a normal human, they then start to pick up other human behaviors that they perhaps felt excluded from when they were in a bigger body. And this is the side of Ozempic that, apart from all the physiological things it's improving, what I love is seeing how it gives someone back the ability to be able to carry out more health-seeking behaviors because they don't feel like they're being as judged doing them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely in terms of the obesity side of things, and obviously having worked with clients, I feel like a lot of people sort of almost have examples of people that they almost identify as a fat person, if you will.
Yeah.
So it might be that they identify as the fat person in their group, which is an example that I've heard someone say on more than
Right.
one occasion.
Yeah.
Or I'm just a fat person. And I'm kind of somewhere in between in terms of like how I think about it. But what I know is that that's not helpful if they ultimately deep down do want to lose weight. Then identifying as the fat person suggests that you're always going to be that. So that's where definitely the language in which the way in which we speak to ourselves sometimes doesn't lend to us being, let's say, more successful with our weight loss. Now, if this drug essentially takes away the need for that a little bit because it just dumbs down that appetite because
Yeah.
we've been brought up around a family that's like, oh, you always must finish your plate, and we eat from
Yeah.
every pot in the middle of the table. We never feel satisfied. Maybe we're a little bit of a foodie and snacks don't just do it. So we need big meals and snacks and all that. this kind of does that for them. But I suppose the next bit of this is what comes after. So, how important is it to acknowledge the changes that are being made or need to be made in terms of habits to then to be able to sustain it long after, the drug hopefully stops, or we stop taking the drug, and then we go back into normal life. So we need to be equipped, if you will, to either continue that journey or to maintain it essentially after that. So I think the next piece of this is to have a little look into what's necessary there. So I suppose whilst they're on the drug, what do they need to
Yeah.
be aware of? And then obviously the support that comes after that.
Okay, so what we have to consider when people go on it, particularly people who are in larger bodies and maybe, do the problem is that they are just constantly thinking about food, constantly eating food. And everyone's biggest, what people love to slag it off for is, well, what happens when they come off it? It is a drug that's designed to be taken chronically. It's some people, it's designed for them to be on for the entirety of their life in the same way a statin is. And, for people that are paying privately for it, that's probably not an option. But when we look back to, this drug's been around for 20 years for diabetes, and people are put on it for life, technically, to manage their diabetes. And I don't think that's accepted enough. People don't like the idea of that, but that is the reality of how the drug was designed. So if I've got a client who is considering going on it, that's the first question I'll ask them is, are you planning on making this the battle plan, so to speak, or do you want to do it to allow some breathing space to then pick up the lifestyle behaviors that you need to in order to maintain that weight when you get down? And what I've seen is for some clients, they can come off it, and I'll go a bit more into this. There's different methods that we can use. They can come off it, and there's a little bit of regain, but nothing significant, and it's really successful. For others, the minute they come off it, their appetite goes exactly back to what it used to be, and all that food noise is back, and they have these uncontrollable cravings, etc. So sadly, they're probably the type of people that it's designed for, in the sense of they would just ideally be on it, long term. What we've found to be really effective, and it's probably my favorite client that I've worked with it, is we've essentially microdosed it. So she kept going up, by nature, you take a certain dose, it suppresses the appetite, and then, like with everything in the body adapts to that, and the appetite starts to come back up again. So we have to keep putting the dose up in small increments for it to continue to be effective. So what one of my clients did was got to a point where she was kind of back at a point where she's craving 3 meals a day. So it was not quite working as effectively as it should be, so to speak. But actually, she identified, I'm able to eat 3 meals a day. I'm able to get 30 grams of protein in each meal. So she's covering, I like to, again, a topic for another day, but that protein intake is of huge importance as we age. A big bolus doses of protein are more effective than eating kind of little bits of protein throughout the day. And of course, by nature, because these GLP-1 drugs slow down gastric emptying, increase the rate at which you feel full, it's very hard to get that much protein down at a time when we need to retain muscle as much as possible. So this client identified that and said, right, I'm going to take it so that it's not quite as effective as it should be. So I've got 3 windows a day to eat 30 grams of protein, and her weight loss has been a lot slower. However, when she starts to take the dose down and come off it, the plan is that now she has gotten this. She had no regular eating pattern whatsoever, very sporadic, which is very, very typical of what I see with busy women, with families and what have you. Now she's in this lovely pattern of eating 3 meals at roughly the same time every day, 30 grams of protein in there. She hits about 30 grams of fiber, because again, fiber is very satiating. It fills people up quickly, and it's often the first thing I see completely sacked off when they go on these drugs. And again, then we're going into the realms of, increase in digestive bowel cancer, for example, reduces the risk of it massively. It's hugely significant. So anyone with a kind of family history of bowel cancer or high cholesterol, things like that, could really do to be making a commitment to hitting these 30 grams of fiber. And it's the first thing that goes when people go on those drugs. So microdosing it is my favorite method to use so that people are having a slight help with reducing those cravings and are able to keep on top of it, but they're still eating like a normal human being. And the caloric deficit is a lot smaller, which then allows, hopefully there's not as much muscle mass loss. But also what you've got to remember is that what I see a lot of is when people are only consuming 600-700 calories a day, they're knackered all the time. Their energy levels are horrific. And often the impact of low energy, low caloric intake is it affects our sleep. So then we have this kind of really tired person because they haven't got enough energy to sustain life, now having crap sleep. So now they're not only low on energy because they're not eating enough calories, they're now not getting enough sleep. And now we're going into this kind of fed up, depressive mentality, where someone who is managing the drug so that they're able to consume a few more calories means they're sleeping better, they have the energy to strength train, so they're keeping muscle mass. And when they make that transition to try and come off the drug, it all feels a little bit less extreme and a little bit more manageable. So that's probably my favorite methodology in doing it. And then I suppose the other approach, it's what people most commonly say is, I want to go on it and lose the weight and learn how to maintain that weight while I'm on it so that when I come off it, I can do that. Now, we know that exercise isn't, I don't know if you agree with me, it's not, it's of course it plays a part in weight loss, but it's not the be all and end all of weight loss. What we actually see with exercise is it's really good for weight maintenance. So if we can get someone who is, overweight and not exercising, we can get them on this drug so that they're then at a place where, like I alluded to earlier, they're confident enough to go in the gym and start giving exercise a try. And whilst they've not got this food noise and they can use that bandwidth to put into getting out and doing X amount of steps every day, strength training 2 or 3 times a week for, 30 minutes. And like you said, and this is the side of it I find fascinating, we know that, I can't remember, what is this guy's name? Give me a second. Where I saw him speak at a conference a few years ago. Rob Young, he's a behavior change expert and talks about the power of just identifying as something. So say you're someone that's never been in a gym, but someone said to you, oh, and join a gym, you've been twice, and someone says, oh, are you a gym goer? And you say, yeah, I go to the gym. Just that language to yourself, if you identify as being someone that does something, the chances of you showing up and doing that increases by however much. So that's what I'm getting at. If you can get someone to go on this drug and then suddenly identify them as someone who can lose weight and does exercise and is someone that's active, if someone that's been very sedentary can then suddenly see themselves as someone that's active, they're more likely to grow into that identity. So if we can use Ozempic to create that space to do that, meaning that when they come off it, they now identify as maybe someone who, gets up and writes a gratitude log every morning. We know, again, very big on bearing in mind most of my clients are stressed out women. They have no concept of putting themselves at the top of the pile, of ever being present, of ever actually allowing themselves to feel the feelings. Everything's just numbed and dumbed down to make sure everyone around them is okay. And that's part of the problem. If I get these women, journaling is something that seemed very airy-fairy. However, we know, so many studies now show that when we pull stuff when we write stuff down, it pulls it to the logic part of our brain so we can siphon out so much bullshit that we're thinking is a big deal that isn't. So, quite often these people that are overweight never take the time to actually assess how they're feeling, or actually a lot of the time the problem is that feelings are being numbed with food. It's a distraction technique. So if all of a sudden that was some woman that was wanting that headspace and they are now getting up every day, journaling, feeling really positive off the back of that, I always say the first health-seeking behavior a day then is an amplifier for the rest of the day. So they do that, they're feeling good, they go and give themselves a nice breakfast because they're feeling good. They're like, right, it's a good morning, I'm going to go out and get my first 5,000 steps in. That then leads to them going, right, now I'm going to make a really good lunch because I've put all this effort into myself. Now I'm going to continue on that trajectory. if we get this woman doing this whilst on Ozempic, she now sees herself as someone who is health seeking. So that should she need to come off the drug, but still identifies as that person, the chances are the day she comes off it, she's going to try and get up that day and start with those health seeking behaviors. And it is literally that chain reaction that if they do one, the rest just come naturally. Whereas someone who identifies themselves as overweight, lazy, unmotivated, a self-sabotager, unsuccessful at everything they've tried, they're never going to do that one thing at the start of the day to allow for the others to follow. And if Ozempic allows someone to do that, I will absolutely get behind it every time.
Yeah, I think the key thing for both of them strategies there is that it's essentially important to focus on the behavior and the habitual, the habit side of it whilst you're doing it, because you need them behaviors to stay afterwards. That obviously starts with essentially making them happen on autopilot. But on the way, it's also important that you attune or change or develop the mindset to be that of someone that just does them things rather than someone that just does them things for weight loss. So this is a big challenge that the ladies that come to me have. When they come, they've dieted loads of times before and they only associate like healthy behaviors as you frame them as something that they do for weight loss. So when they lose the weight, they then stop doing the thing that got them to lose the weight and then the cycle continues and continues. So the way I try to work with the ladies that I work with is that we're going to leave that behind and we're now going to accept that this is us. This is what we need to do, not just for weight loss, but to be healthier, happier, have more energy, feel more confident, yes, as the fat loss happens. But ultimately, if we want to live that life where we can get out of a chair, where we can just generally have the energy and be of good mental health, then we need to do these things as well. And not to segue too much, I've said it loads of times before. I genuinely believe that if exercise was a drug, it would be prescribed to pretty much everyone on the planet. It'd be like, you have it, you have it, you have it, you have it. But instead, it's just seen as this thing that is like, oh, I've got to do that for weight
Yeah.
loss. And to go back to what you said before, like, actually we don't burn that many calories when exercising. And I agree with you. Like I'll set people up, we need to manage your calories. Protein's important. We need to manage your steps. And the exercise is the cherry on the cake in an exercise sense. Like if I get uber specific with someone, maybe we might start increasing cardio to increase calorie expenditure. We're getting quite specific at that point. Like usually I can just manipulate calories or number of steps that they're doing. Set it up in a way that they feel successful and then they keep doing it and they stay at the table
Yeah.
and then they understand the value of it long term for just general health and well-being as well. And I think that's what has to happen with this. It can't just be, okay, I'm just going to do this drug. Like we've already established hopefully early in the podcast that that's a bad idea. So
Yeah.
just doing the drug and nothing else is a terrible idea. Doing the drug and doing some exercise and looking at what we're eating is a good idea. And then an even better idea is shaping our mindset and our habits so that we accept that it stays long term. And I suppose to summarize that however that looks for you, that's the best strategy. It's not like, okay, I need to lose 2 stone for the summer holiday coming up now. I'm going to do this drug. And then with no plan of sort of what comes next. It's accepting that I'm in this now. I have to do this for good if I want to feel good and be at my optimal or peaked health as I get older as well. Which hopefully summarizes what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. I think exactly that. There's this thing called the arrival fallacy where it's the perception of how happy something's going to make you when you achieve it versus the reality of it. So you see it with like, I think the most famous example is like Olympic gold medal winners, they spend the best part of their life. And then when they get that medal afterwards, it's actually a little bit of a letdown. It's kind of like, right, this doesn't feel anywhere. I don't feel anywhere as accomplished as I'm supposed to. And we see it all the time with weight loss. And I have one client on these drugs who has literally done that, gone on it, eats hardly anything, and has done nothing else. But, we're still trying and has dropped a ton of weight and is not one bit happier than the first day she came to me and tried it. So you can see that acting out there. And with regards to what you've just said, when someone comes on board with me, I'll say to them the first month, I'm not even going to promise you any weight loss. I'm not going to expect any weight loss. I'm not even going to ask if you've had any weight loss because to be in a smaller body, you need to be living a different life to the one you're living now. Like our body is in real time representation of the lifestyle we are living. So my job as a coach, if someone's come to me for fat loss, is to focus them on, right, how are we going to change you into a slightly different person so that you become a person that sits continually in a slightly smaller body? And we do that by working on expectations and lifestyle habits and behaviors way before we start looking for the weight loss. And eventually it stays in that order. So they'll come to me, we'll have an hour conversation, and at the end they'll go, oh, by the way, I've like lost 2 kilos in the last 2 weeks. And I love it because I'm like, I'm so glad you've told me that, but I'm so glad you told me as the last thing because it's kind of become the least important. Because, like you've just said, once someone understands the power of exercise and movement and not being sedentary and, making food about enjoyment as well as figures and quantities, they suddenly realize that, oh shit, like I'm just a miles happier person and I happen to be losing weight, not I won't be happy until I've lost that weight. They're two very opposed views, but sadly, most of this population sits in the latter, and it's our jobs as coaches. I see it as my job to pull them out of that mindset before they get the weight loss, not get the weight loss to find the happiness.
It's whilst they're on the journey, isn't it? It's like I hear off my
Exactly.
like I'm happy to say it. I'll hear off my partner. She'll be like, "Oh well, it's really slow," and I'm like this month she's lost 3 kilos. She's lost like half a stone basically in a month, and I'm like, that's absolutely amazing. And like if I try to explain like from like PT Dale and not partner Dale, not that I'm training her, but that from the data I've got and the clients that I've worked with and all of that, actually a pound a week of fat loss is incredible progress. And if you add that together over the span of time, that's amazing. But everybody wants the destination now because, like you say, life's going to be so much better then. When in fact, if we have that mindset, chances are when we get to that weight, we're going to find ourselves back at the other weight pretty quickly if that's how we think about it, instead of just enjoying the process and accepting this weight came on over time. It's going to come off over time. I might as well enjoy the process whilst I'm doing it and appreciate how I feel because I think we're quick, rather than being quick to accept that we feel better, we have more energy and all of that. We're quick to forget how sluggish and shit that we felt essentially before we made the changes.
Completely. And that, I think it's the biggest gift you can give yourself is the art of delayed gratification. And again, it's one of the first topics I work on. I think it's such an underrated practice, that if you instantly changing your expectation, I always explain it's like, paying a mortgage. You pay it. It's nothing. There's nothing exciting about paying your mortgage every month. But then in however many years' time, you get to go. None of that was exciting, but the feeling now of owning my own house is phenomenal. It's the same with, like, I'm training for a marathon at the moment, and the biggest thing that I've loved about it is all of that it's teaching me. Like, and nothing happens overnight. Everything takes absolutely ages. It's not particularly rewarding you know, day in, day out. But over time, what I've learned and the, things that I'm taking from it, it'll carry me through to so many other things in my life as I go through life. I've learned so much from it. And I think if you can give people that perception of weight loss, just be like, just take the pressure off. And the problem, you've just said it there. People like losing a pound a week think that's horrific because the majority of my clients, I don't know about you, I've come from like Weight Watchers, Slimming World, where the culture is you lose as much as you can week in, week out. The majority of it's water. So they're
And you
expecting,
post it on Facebook, Jules, as
yeah,
well. You have to
yeah,
post your weigh-in on Facebook.
yeah, stand there with a little whiteboard, so you can be compared with everyone else. So their perception of good or bad weight loss is so skewed from the off. And I'm like, it hurts my ears to hear that you think you should be losing £4 a week. Like, absolutely, let's draw the line there and let's take you into a different world where your
Lack of
mindset's
education, isn't it? Like, just to interject there, because I was talking about this with a client recently. I was like, okay, right, in a rest at the gym, and I was like, right, we're going to do this on the board now. So I drew up the concept that 3,500 calories is a pound of body fat, and
yeah,
that to lose that per week is a deficit of that. And I'm like, how the hell are you going to create a 14,000 calorie deficit? You don't even eat that much.
yeah,
Like, It's do you know what I mean? That would be £4. Like you're never going to lose 3 or 4 pounds in a week, and if you are, it's not fat. It's everything else in between that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And like you said, delayed gratification, just accepting that slow, steady progress over time is far better than up, down, up, down, up,
Yeah,
down, up, down.
completely. And if you get them, you say, right, you lose, £0.5 a week, because that's quite a common one with mine. So I'm like, so that's £2 a month. I'm like, what are we in now? March. And I can never do math quickly. Like, right, let's take you to June. What have we lost there? Is that 3 months?
Very
Six
good.
pounds. How good's that going to feel? And nothing's changed about your life. You're doing what you're doing now. You're going out on a weekend. You're walking. You're doing a bit of strength training, nothing heavy. And then by October, where we at? I don't know, £8. And then I'm like, look how miserable you were last Christmas. Think of next Christmas where you've had this really easy year where you've done nothing massively different. And all of a sudden you're in this body and then they'll start to see, you've got to almost give them the vision of being ahead of time and looking back rather than being in the now and getting frustrated with what hasn't happened. And you start to see them see it, but no one's ever challenged them on it. No one's ever said, do you realize it's ridiculous to lose £4, a week?
It gets reinforced though, doesn't it? I mean, I'm saying it because there's someone on Facebook at the minute that I've got that, friend of a friend who's doing Slimming World and is losing, quite a bit of weight. But it's like, oh, I really hope this week that it's a good way. And it's like, oh, it stayed the same, or oh, it's gone up. But you get all the people from the group or the people that are thinking of going to the group reinforcing this. It's like, oh, £5 down this week. Oh, amazing, amazing. You're doing really well, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, okay, if I don't lose £5 next week, then I'm not doing really well and not getting
And,
this
and
positive
I'm
feedback.
Yeah, and that external gratification and
Mm.
almost a maintenance then becomes a bit shameful. And again, it's like the shame bell's getting rang when it happens in whatever village hall they're in.
They've probably lost body fat. It's just the scales aren't representing.
Completely. They've probably gained 3 pounds of water because it's that week in the menstrual cycle.
Mm.
And underneath it lost a pound, but it's been hidden in the water, but they're still getting the shame bell rang in
Yeah, or
their
they had a few more sins the day before, and or
Yeah.
whatever.
It,
But
oh,
this is the lack of education around it, which we circle back to, which I suppose at
yeah.
the start of this episode we talked about that, didn't we? Like what needs to come with this, and I suppose, at government level at the end of the day, is more education around this side of things because nobody knows anything about it, like nobody knows anything about the menopause or whatever, because you never taught this stuff. So you just know what someone tells you or from an advert from, I know there was something in the group the other day, wasn't there, about like certain people advertising certain products and them being fucking useless basically.
Absolute
But
bullshit. Yeah.
everybody's taking them because everybody's taking them rather than it being from a pure educational standpoint.
Yeah.
So, it's deep and that's a conversation for another day. But I think
Certainly.
is there anything to summarize today? Is there anything else you want to add or think we need to cover before we wrap up?
No, I just think when it comes to these GLP-1 drugs, it's just that really to ask people to take a breath and question your own bias on it before you judge. I think like you said right at the start, this drug is not going anywhere. Like if you only have to look at its market worth going, projected forward. I have a friend that works for a medical company and has said there's no question but to invest in this drug because it's going to blow up. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to have a real impact on, I think we were getting to really good places with body image, particularly for, young girls. This slightly bigger, more athletic body was becoming far more acceptable, and it's going to shake that on its head. But that's giving most people a bias that this is a bad thing, that it's got terrible side effects, and it's the long-term effects are going to be horrific. I think just take a breath and question that bias. The fact is obesity is one of the biggest killers in the world. This is something that has given us a solution to that. And if we keep an open mind and keep being open to being educated about it, I think the land will, it will just be accepted in more communities and using the capacity it's supposed to, rather than everyone just jumping onto the fact that it's cheating and it's going to kill everyone. And, we need to, it's very nuanced and we all need to sit somewhere in the middle. But if you've got friends or family that have chosen to go on it and are overweight, please approach that with an open mind and an air of encouragement rather than just shooting people down, because that's all I'm seeing at the moment. And
Mm.
it's not really helping anyone.
No, I agree. I think the people don't understand about it again, so it comes around to the education side of it. Um, but also, I think that's yeah, it's the lack of understanding of what it is and why people need it. I think that's the big
Yes.
thing. Like, I think from a you'll have coaches sort of jump on it, and it's like, oh, it's the lazy option, or it's this, that, and the other. But the clients that a PT might moan about, the clients that need help the most, right? Because if they're making a decision still to pay you or whoever it is that they're paying, um, they obviously still want it, right? Like there's something in there and a reason that they're still showing up and they're still paying you each month, even if progress has halted and you're getting frustrated with them if it's excuses or whatever. And it goes back to a little bit before of what you were saying with, how their, hunger levels are different from other people and
Yeah.
have you, and their desires to do certain behaviors and stuff. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still try and help them. And this is something that can sort of bridge that gap, I think. But again, it needs to be something that the fitness industry as well, like not just the people listening in, but I think the fitness industry, like you said, there's a middle ground, like almost accept it and understand that there is a place for it. And some people would benefit from it, providing that they use it with, I suppose, the strategies that you've shared today, which I think both of the options are quite similar, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
In terms of focusing on habits and behaviors and slowing it down. So I think the cusp of that was that it was maybe reducing down the dosage so that it's slower, so that you're not getting, I suppose, the side effects of losing too much muscle mass and wanting things now, and setting those habits and behaviors up so that they're there to stay
That's
long.
it. That's it. You're learning the art of consistency, which we know is the way that people get results long term. And I think as coaches, rather than seeing it as like a threat against the industry, we have to see it as that we are the essential part to aid it. There's so much to be said about if someone goes on Ozempic, what they need more than anything is someone to educate them and coach them and make sure that they are strength training whilst they do it. So start to see it as a way to attract business rather than something that's going to take away business from you. We can absolutely, all coaches are absolutely a perfect fit for this drug. I know there's financial implications if people are paying for it and then having to pay you. But like I said earlier, it's not going anywhere. And the best gift someone can give themselves is coaching alongside it. So just to not feel threatened by it, see it as, another tool in the box that you can use in your coaching business.
I agree totally. So, Jules, thank you very much for the chat and the
Pleasure.
insights. We will wrap up there before you shoot off. If people do want to know a little bit more about you, follow your content, all of that stuff, where can they do that?
Okay, so I'm mainly active on Instagram. So it's life_and_fork. And the website's just Life and Fork into Google. It'll come up there. So that's mainly the two places you'll find me most.
We'll stick that in the notes and stuff like that so people can access it. And then if people have any questions about it and stuff like that as well, I'm sure they can reach out and pop you a message.
Absolutely. I love a question. As you can probably tell, I go on quite a lot when people ask me them, but I thoroughly enjoy it. And thank you so much for having me. It's been really nice to chat to you.
No worries. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jules.
All right, take care.
Thanks for tuning in for today's episode. I hope you found that useful and valuable. If you'd like to hear more from us, all you need to do is hit the subscribe button and we'll see you on the next episode.